Interdimensional alignment. Interdimensional alignment would be the concept of aligning the self to the greatest flows in reality. It would almost seem like a chain formed by perfect flowers that have stemmed from the golden spot over several lifetimes. Let's call this a golden chain. In a six-dimensional view, this could be considered a golden wire, similar to an electrical wire used to pass information or electricity in common household applications. In typical household wires, the more solid a wire is, the better it will perform. You can see in the golden chain that the delusions overlap in such a way that energy or information may be easily transferred. This would be an example of someone who has never achieved their golden spot. The reincarnations do still overlap, and information may be passed from one to another. However, it is clearly not as efficient at doing so. The quantum nature of reality shows us that all lives overlap within the loosh. This means as you effectively remove delusions from your current life, past and future lives will also be affected. Seed crystals. Seed crystals are commonly used in the fabrication of pure crystals. They are essentially a single grain that has a perfect three-dimensional structure which contains the desired structure for the material being grown. A very common application of this is in the fabrication of silicone wafers for computer chips. In short, in order to make a perfect silicone wafer for computer chips, you first start by melting a volume of silicone. Then, while the silicone is in a liquid state, you slowly dip your seed crystal in from above. The seed crystal is not liquid, it is solid and has the shape of the desired formation. The seed crystal is then slowly raised from the molten silicone, and as it does, the molten silicone sticks to it and rises with it. As the seed crystal continues to be lifted, the molten material begins to solidify. As the material solidifies, it takes a crystal formation. Typical crystals solidifying in the wild are exposed to many different physical vibrations, and so the crystal does not always come out perfect. However, with the use of a seed crystal and the method described, you may form perfect crystals of any size and of any material. We will return to this. Cleansing hitchhikers. Understanding that our mind, body, and spirit distortions create habitats within the loosh, we see that each delusion contains a degree of turbulence to it in relationship to the greater flow or river of time. Let's now compare this drawing to a river. In a river, different animals and beings live in different parts. Some animals live where the water is deeper, and some live where it is shallow. Some animals prefer faster moving water, and some prefer slower moving water. It is the same within the river of time. Different beings may inhabit different sized vortices. Each of these beings is conscious and aware and wishes to continue to thrive like all animals. They want to reproduce, expand their habitats, and so on. It may be challenging to see, but there are beings that may only survive within doubtful flows of space. When it comes to conscious influencers within time, they typically will guide you into a karmic loop of their liking. Very rarely is this beneficial for the host. The host will typically increase in pacing, which causes all others connected to increase in pacing. This increases the size of the habitat that this being may inhabit. The fifth dimensional being may now grow even more. It is important to be aware of what causes the pacing motions in your life. What actually triggered it? Was it a thought? Where did that thought come from? The human is naturally loving and caring. It is negative thoughts that then lead to destructive behaviors. Remember, we may take posture in all three aspects, mind, body, and spirit. It is possible to cleanse ourselves through posture control. The easiest way to cleanse the self is to connect to the greatest flows of reality. This would imply watching the sun rise and watching the sun set. It is also possible that certain places on Earth naturally contain habitats for beings of denser and less dense flows of space. These places would typically exist where there would be an expansion or compression of space and time. For example, the magnetic hotspots of Earth may naturally act like pools of habitable fields of energy. Hurricanes and the loosh. Let's now consider the concept of a hurricane and how it affects the ocean water as it passes. In short, the hurricane is basically an energetic vortex that moves along the Earth. The main driver of the hurricane is pressure differences. This causes massive distortions on the surface of the ocean. It causes sea levels to rise and to flow onto land, causing destruction. The important point here, though, is that the height of the water depends directly on the pressure differences created by the hurricane. The same effect is true for a tornado, however, the pressure is so high that the water will be sucked through the vortex in the center. When you relate this to the mind, body, and spirit distortions created by pacing, you see that each pacing also creates a certain amount of pressure within the fluid of experience. It would be very similar to as what the bulge of what a hurricane or tornado does as it passes over land or water. This shows that the height of the habitat depends directly on the intensity and duration of the cycle size. It is somewhat reversed when it comes to perception. In a way, you can think of them as holes that are being created. This goes back to the concept of the line of sight. If you are in a deep valley or hole, you cannot see very far. However, as you remove delusion and equalize your tornado with the natural flow of reality, you may see that you are now standing on top of a mountain, able to overlook and peer into the delusions of others. From this position, we may now offer a helping hand and pull others out of their holes or spirals of delusion. Great cycles in relationship to orbiting universes. There are many orbits within the Loosh that may offer habitats to conscious beings. When we look at the relationship of our experience to the nearest habitable zones, we see that time dilations exist. Zones towards the Noviverse would experience more time, and zones towards the lower verse would be experiencing less time. Considering experiences are becoming denser, we see that the lower verse side could be considered beings from the past, or of a more pure nature. The time dilation chart shown earlier depicted the alignments as we go inward. Every second we align with inner rings. When it comes to aligning with outer rings, this happens much less regular. For 1 second that passes in the next outer ring, 1 hour and 1 minute would pass in our experience. The next alignment would happen every 185 days. The alignment that we are currently undergoing is one that occurs at roughly every 2029 years. The last great cycle could be related to the age of the Pisces, or the coming of Jesus. Pure speculation, but the Star of David may have been created by a temporary alignment of orbiting universes from the lower verse direction. We are now entering the age of Aquarius. To relate this to religion, God could be considered the greatest laminar flow of our entire experience, or creation. Although we are all children, or fractals of the flow, there are times when the most undisturbed and purest energy may fill our perspective. During these great alignments, reincarnated beings may return to reseed or fertilize the planet once more. These seeds then perform their purpose. Cluster origins. Not all conscious crystals in time are in direct contact with each other. This creates clusters of conscious co-creation. A simple example may be a family. Imagine a father, a mother, a son, a daughter, and maybe even a cat or dog. They may have their own co-conscious reality that is then exchanged via metallic bonding of sorts with other conscious crystals. This would translate directly in the types of cliques or gangs that exist in the human population. We are all humans that live on Earth, and so you would assume we have the same goals and general constructs of reality. However, in practice, they are much different. They are all almost like their own co-created consciousness, or grains of time. You can see in this simple representation how the two individual grains may experience different viewpoints on cultural issues. There has not been enough exchange of universes for them to be properly tuned to each other. The more time between sharing universes, the more different the clusters of co-conscious creation become. However, once direct covalent bonds have been made, it is likely that the individual experiences, viewpoints, or rather expectations will merge. Grains within crystals. Let's now go back and consider the concept of seed crystals in relationship to making desired crystals of any type. In order for a crystal to properly take shape of the seed, it must first become molten. For example, when relating to the silicone wafer, grains and silicones that are not fully melted will not be able to take the shape of the seed crystal, as it rises from the batch of liquid sand. This would be considered an imperfection or unusable section of the wafer. Unusable material typically will be melted down again and used during the process of forming the next crystal. Molten distortions. Considering we are all composed of mind, body, and spirit, and understanding how postures of all three may solidify, we see that maintained experiences within fractals of delusion may cause our postures to solidify. Understanding this and knowing we are somewhat born into fractals of delusion, we see that a liquefying of all selves is somewhat necessary in order to take a more pure vibration within the crystal of time. It is important that the crystals of consciousness reorganize itself periodically so that denser harmonics of conscious evolution may continue to exist. If the crystal becomes too granular, then there is not enough stability or laminar flow within the fluid of experience in order for denser beings to evolve or exist. The smaller the grains of consciousness are, the more turbulent the fluid of time becomes. Therefore, there is a direct relationship with the conscious grain size and conscious types that may exist. Grain size relates directly to tortuosity, so therefore the largest, most stable crystals will have the greatest laminar flows and most intelligent beings. Grain size in relationship to cooling rates. There is also a direct relationship to grain size and the rate the material is cooled after becoming liquefied. The quicker the material crystallizes, the smaller the grains become. Molten material that cools over long periods of time form the largest grains of any material. Fluid perceptions. When you consider a molten mind, body, and spirit diagram versus one that has taken postures and solidified, you see that much friction may exist. All beings rise in conscious density as our experience drifts inwards, and so a liquefaction is somewhat necessary in order for beings of higher density to continue to exist.